Hey guys, Tarke here, and I'm going to be giving my thoughts on the dev post. I'm not going to read it word for word. If you want that content, you can check my Twitch VOD. I'll leave that linked down below. This is basically the things which surprised me, the main things to really notice from this. So starting off with the big surprises, there's been a crit rework completely hit me by left field. And this is actually a pretty substantial nerf to Ellie Overload. I was actually hoping that we'd maybe see some buffs to Ellie Overload. I'm a big fan of non-crit build, just because I find crit is a bit boring. Diamond flasks are very strong. It's a boring flask in that sense. I like having more options when it comes to utility flasks. It's a big reason why I lean into a lot of dot focus builds, because dot builds are not crit. So the fact that Ellie Overload didn't receive any buffs, but also the crit changes came in. If you missed it before, crit chance had a minimum of 5% and a maximum of 95%. It's now a minimum of 0% and a maximum of 100%. This is a massive buff for any crit build, and then a pretty substantial nerf for any non-crit build, because if you're using stuff like Controlled Destruction on any Overload build, you're going to be pretty screwed when it comes to your crit. So, pretty disappointed by that. Another thing which very much caught me out of left field is zero mention about EE. Elemental Equilibrium was something they said they wanted to talk about in the past. We saw the exposure rework coming in about how they're changing a lot of penetration-based skills. It was they're finally addressing penetration, so they'll have exposure and then they'll make EE. I was gonna say it'd be greater exposure, or would apply maybe 50% pen, but then wouldn't stack. So the fact they didn't change it at all is really bizarre. They could still change it in the patch notes, but it's the kind of thing I'd imagine you'd want to talk about. It could be that since they've come up with the exposure system, they think that they've fixed it that way because you can't super stack. But I must admit, I was pretty surprised that nothing came in for that. Now, as I said, the crit change is a massive buff to any crit build, and a pretty big slap for any non-crit build. This is also a buff to non-spellcasters, so anyone who's playing attack builds, rejoice. This is a buff for you. Yeah, crit definitely didn't need to be stronger. This is also something to kind of keep in mind. I don't know if this will affect enemies. So if enemies will have 100% crit chance, we've seen a nerf to accuracy on Enfeeble. So crit reduction might be more important for the people who push super deep delves or maybe super synthesis stuff. Maybe you're gonna have more crit avoidance, possibly. Now there's also the whole ES Leech thing. We're seeing new notables on the passive skill tree. We've been teased a lot of items with ES Leech. The fact that we've been teased so many ES Leech items, I was like, ooh, cool. This is how we're going to get Leech now. But because they've put ES Leech on the tree in such available places, it makes the new ES Leech items feel pretty meh, because you're not really going to need to stack it up that much because you'll hit the Leech cap, and they've changed how Leech works now. So it seems like we went from having 0 options to all of the options. So that to me is pretty odd. Some pretty big sleeper winners. These are the things which are massive, massive things, but they're not quite as sexy. So people aren't super talking about it. But the Onslaught support and Summon Phantasm support being changed now have effects on hitting rare and unique enemies. So basically, for any summoner, you're going to use Summon Phantasm support in a lot of your setups now. If you were a Solar Guard summoner, for example, you can have this in for map clear and then keep it in for boss damage. Huge buff. This is also a slight buff to Soul Rest builds, it makes it even more automated. But the Onslaught thing is huge. The reason why the Onslaught thing is so large is you can now have a cast and damage taken Stormbrand or Orb of Storms linked with Onslaught, or you could just manually do Orb of Storms, curse on hit, whatever curse, Onslaught, drop on the boss, and you're always going to have Onslaught up while bossing. Every build now has a reliable and steady way of having Onslaught and bossing. This is also a very nice buff for summoners in conjunction here. Summoners struggled getting Onslaught without using a flask. Now, if we're using Ball Lightning EE, Ball Lightning curse on hit, you have Onslaught now. So you now have steady Onslaught uptime. For bosses and for maps, if you're hitting rares with it regularly. So you're going to gain, a flask. This is really big for lots of builds. Really, really big. Insane. Gaining a flask slot is quite nice. So, getting into, the controversial changes, the things that people are but Tarke, The Leech changes. So the Leech changes, everyone's like, this is the death of Scion! Rip Slayer! I will admit, Scion did get slapped pretty hard. So basically what they've done is they've really slapped about the maximum duration. Anyone who played Slayers before, you could get like easily 30 seconds to a minute of just Super Leech. Boom, 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 boom. This is now capped at 5 seconds hard for Slayer, and then Psalms will be 2.5 seconds if my maths is correct. Going from like a minute to like 5 seconds is a slight change. It's still good though, it's still one of the strongest defenses in the game, and if you use a Worm Flask, you can still have like 100% uptime on this, and this is still very, very strong for bossing. So if you want to do Slayer stuff, there's still a reason to do it, it's still very strong. Scion did get hit like pretty massively, but it's still strong if you're regularly hitting the boss. For people saying that Scion's completely dead though, Scion can never be dead when it has the Pathfinder node. One of the most powerful things about Scion is having the 100% uptime of flasks. So you still have the Pathfinder 100% uptime, and even if we're seeing less attack-based Scions, there'll always be a lot of utility-based Scions. Support Scion is also always incredibly powerful, so while we'll see a lot less Scions, I wouldn't completely ignore it. Scion will still be a good option for like totem builds, basically anything which wasn't doing it just for the leech. So like totem supports, maybe some dot builds or whatever. It's still pretty good, and I do think Slayer will actually kind of be sleeper pretty strong because Super Leech is always going to be good. Now, do I think this is a good change or a bad change? Personally, I think this is a very good change. Super Leech, it just wasn't healthy. It made the game feel a bit boring. I think it's kind of in the same vein as the old instant Volpact Leech. GGG is trying to make the game more impactful and feel more fun, feel more reactive, and having your health bar constantly go... While it's fun to watch, it's not very riveting gameplay. I honestly think this is very good for the long-term health of the game, and it sucks now, but you'll look back at it and be like, yeah, this was something I'm glad they changed. And it's still there. 5 seconds is a long time. If you think about it, for a boss, only having to hit a boss once every 5 seconds, it's pretty good, right? So, getting into the max resist changes. Maximum resists are now hard capped at 90%, and they're increasing our options when it comes to gaining maximum resists. This I also think is a good change. So maximum resist has always been one of the most powerful stats in Path of Exile, going back all the way to the very, very beginning. Because of that, we've had incredibly few options when it comes to gaining max res. By giving it a hard cap like this, they can give us a lot more options. It makes build design a lot more interesting. We're seeing like crazy reductions to purity reservation on synthesized mods. We're seeing synthesized implicits or fraction implicits, whatever it is, with maximum res. I think it's interesting seeing how much you can bundle into your build, but by giving this hard cap, it stops it getting over a certain value. This also means that they can balance boss damage a lot more reliably now, because before it's like, okay, so if someone could get theoretically like 95, 98, 97, or just 100% max res, how do we balance this like Itziri Flame Blast now? Having this hard cap makes it a lot easier to design encounters for GGG, and again, long-term health of the game, I think this is good. And I'm really interested to see how this plays out. Now, we're also seeing a change to Val Impurity. This will provide less damage taken of the element. So for any Righteous Fire boys out there, don't worry, there'll still be very easy Righteous Fire stuff you can do, but I think it's pretty good. The things that I'm really excited for, because there are a few things I'm really hyped about. I agree with nearly everything in here aside from the Ellie Overload stuff. The future of corpse skills. I've made a video talking about it. I'm really excited to maybe play Cremation. I'm expecting Poet's Pen to be killed, or not necessarily killed, but I'm expecting you can only use 1 at a time, not 2 at a time. So I'm expecting big buffs to the corpse skills and pushing self-cast corpse skills. They're increasing the travel speed of Unearth. That was one thing which used to make like self-cast VD feel very clunky. Desecrate had a bit too much of a cooldown, Unearth had a bit too much of a travel time. Making that feel a lot better is going to make the gameplay feel so much smoother. And doing like some Trickster Volatile Dead self-cast stuff, or Inquiz self-cast Volatile Dead, very powerful. Very, very strong. They're also buffing the weapon clusters for spellcasters on the passive skill tree. So stuff like Dark Arts, cast stuff, or dual wielding, the stave nodes, the shield nodes, they're being substantially buffed. So stave nodes for spellcasters are going to have AoE involved in there. The dual wield stuff is going to be big deeps and cast speed, and then the shields will have a lot of defense. Now the caster shield nodes, like for example Mind Barrier and Sanctity, were already pretty strong on niche builds, so giving these major buffs is actually pretty big. We might even see some pretty cool like hybrid dodge block builds coming out of this, and the staff nodes were already pretty strong, so making them even better is huge. I'm really excited to see how this changes up the routing of the trees. Assuming they get the job right and they all feel good to play, it's going to make routing a lot more interesting, because the staff nodes are all the way over here, and here you have this kind of awkward to reach cluster up here, but you know, it's like, oh well, maybe I'll do, you know, a dual wield cold build because they're right next to each other, and the shield nodes are kind of awkward down here, but maybe I'll come up with a build which needs to come down this way, maybe get tireless, and you'll start to see certain elements leaning into certain weapon types, and that's just exciting because it will take us a league, maybe even 2 leagues, to kind of even out what works best for what. It's just exciting to just play. It's just good. I like stuff like that. Anything which changes how people root trees is a big thumbs up from me. More Trickster love. Trickster was already like my favorite ascendancy. Like Cultist and Trickster are my favorite too. I basically only played Tricksters last league. I said I was going to start Tricksters this league. Yeah, Trickster. So we've got this really cool Ghost Shroud mechanic. We don't know exactly what Escape Artist will do yet, but basically Ghost Dance is giving you this new Shroud mechanic, and then this will make the Shroud mechanic feel better. Every single node in Trickster is very powerful, like very strong. So we're going to be in this situation now where if you play any Trickster build, you're going to have to really think about what nodes you take. Most Tricksters before would default to Patient Reaper, Weave the Arcane, Swift Killer. If they were in a upfront build, Harnessed. If they were a dot build, Prolonged Pain. Now suddenly it's like, oh, we've got these very strong mechanics here now. Let's say that these are so good these have become auto picks. Like, okay, we've locked in these 4 points. Shit, do I want the upfront damage? Do I want the dot damage? Do I want the insane cast speed and mana sustain? Do I want the frenzy and power charge sustain? And for channeling build, they have 100% uptime on their charges now. It's like every node is good. It's like a cultist. Like everyone in the cultist is like, shit, do I take this or do I take this or do I go like Withering Presence plus this? But the Trickster ones are even better because the power charge node is whatever. I really like what they've done with Trickster. It's going to be a serious discussion where you'll have multiple people playing the exact same build arguing over what ascendancy points to take. And I think that's cool. When you have people playing the exact same build and it's like, we're watching Rise do it, he's gotten like a completely different ascendancy to Tarke, and then Noogie's playing the exact same build with different ascendancies, but he's going dual wield, and the other guy's going sword, and the other guy's going staves, and it's that stuff really gets me going. I think that stuff's really cool. The other big thing is fork and change. I have videos going back basically as far as I started making YouTube content about PoE, saying how fork is one of my favorite mechanics in Path of Exile, and it always felt bad to use the gem, and that really sucked. They're doing substantial buffs to the gems there, so I'm really hyped to play some Fork builds. Fork is big boy. Fork is really fun. I'm hoping that you're just going to be like, you know how you just shove G and P on builds? I'm hoping Fork is like, yeah, let's just shove fucking Fork on this build now. We're really excited for that. We're seeing some reworks of curses. Basically what they're doing is they're lowering the boss's curse resistance, but they're giving like a special cap to temp chains and feeble. So any non-temp chains or enfeeble curse will be a lot more effective on bosses, but now temp chains and feeble have their own separate like hard cap. This is obviously a nerf to temp chains and enfeeble. Temp chains and feeble are already broken, so they'll be fine, trust me. And it means that if you're someone using Warlord's Mark, for example, and you needed that reliable leech, Warlord's Mark is going to be a lot better now. So this will make a lot of builds feel better. Both attack-based, well, attack builds don't really need Warlord's Mark, but make a lot of spellcast builds feel a lot better with Warlord's Mark. It will make a lot of life gain on hit builds feel a lot better if they're using those curses. It's just big. It's really nice. Making builds care about curses again, that's what feels good, man. Just things worth mentioning. Mana cost reworked. They've looked at the mana cost of all the skills across the board and rebalanced them with the massive spell focus. Very strong. It's always sucks when you want to play a spell, even if it's a spell which isn't even that powerful, you just want to play it for sort of stupid mana cost. and they've changed the cast time of a few things. The big one which really stood out to me was discharge going from a 1 second to a 0.75 second. That's a huge cast time buff. Maybe we'll see the return of the glorious burning self-discharge. And yeah, Inquiz is really good. So Inquiz has a new node where whenever you stop moving, whenever you're stationary, you create consecrated ground. And they've also buffed the hell out of consecrated ground. And then the effects of consecrated ground linger for 4 seconds after you've been in it, which is really good. This is also a nerf to Cyclone. So Cyclone was nerfed again. So with Cyclone, you're always moving. And before, you used to create consecrated ground when you killed and hit enemies. But now, to get consecrated ground for your Cyclone build, you're going to have to stop cycloning, which means you're then not dealing damage, and it means you can be stunned. So it's good to know that that Cyclone nerf did make it into the patch notes. I was a bit worried that maybe it wouldn't quite make it in this time around. But other than the Ellie overload stuff, I'm honestly super in favor of these changes. I think this is... each Dev Manifesto has been better. Like, for a couple of weeks I've been like, yes, I agree, I agree, I agree. This is big. This is really, really big. Sad about EO. Maybe they might change their mind, or there might be something in the patch notes we don't know about. But yeah. Very excited to get the full patch notes tomorrow and expect a lot of cool builds coming out. Expect a lot of Trickster builds coming out. I'm Tarke. Have a good day. Was not expecting brand changes, by the way. Bye-bye.